right? But there's a lot of opinions about real estate on X. A lot of claimed experts talking about something called a silver tsunami. So the concept being baby boomers are obviously aging out and slowly but surely exiting.
Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's the other piece of this conversation is trust loans are not cheap loans to get, right? So if you're working with an estate planner and you can plan this out a little bit, because a lot of people in older age, it's a gradual thing, right? It doesn't happen overnight where they pass. So you can try to get a traditional cash out refinance loan at normal rates and normal fees and avoid that altogether.
If you hire an incredible escrow company, you should be okay, is what I'll say. Right, because they can help chaperone this thing in a way that a buyer or a seller can't on their own. And if it's an escrow that really knows what they're doing. We're back. Welcome back to the Mortgage Lounge. Jason Thibodeau here and Mike Grambow, my awesome co-host. Hello. How are you doing today?
Doing good.
We have a few things to talk about today. One of the things that we're going to kick it right off with a topic about baby boomers again. I've noticed, I can't help myself. I'm on X and Twitter pretty regularly, which is overwhelming in and of itself, right? But there's a lot of opinions about real estate on X. A lot of claimed experts talking about something called a silver tsunami. So the concept being baby boomers are obviously aging out and slowly but surely exiting, meaning dying over the course of the next 10, 15 years, right? Because baby boomer generation's getting pretty old. The date range for baby boomers, if you were born between the years 1946 and 1964. Right. So, Mr. Math Whiz, what would that make the oldest baby boomer right now, 1946?
Well, I'll skip ahead to 1935 would make somebody 85 years old if they were born in 1950. So that's, you're going to make me do the math?
Yeah.
1946. So
that's 54 plus 25.
That's
right?
What, yeah.
Yeah.
So 90,
yeah.
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 54, 95, 99.
Yeah, thank you. Bottom line is, right, they're getting older. And so the silver tsunami in real estate, it means that all these baby boomers over the course of, the next 10, 12 years are going to be dying. And that means there's going to be a flood of inventory hitting the markets, and therefore it's going to crash the real estate market. We're going to see prices drastically drop. Now, I have my own pushback on that, which we'll talk about. But if you're looking at the chart here, you're going to see how it slowly but surely rises. And that makes sense, right? Because every year that goes by, baby boomer generation gets older and older, culminating in 2035, where there's estimates of 1.2 million baby boomer homeowners will die. So it's not like I don't understand the fact that, they're no longer alive. What's going to happen with that real estate? But before I give my opinion, I'll let you take the floor. What do you think of that?
Yeah, so right in the middle would be 1950-ish from the date range you gave.
Yeah.
So that in 2035, someone born in 1950 is going to be 85 years old. That's average life expectancy-ish, right?
Not if you're a dude. That's more if you're a female.
Yeah. There's lots of videos on why guys live shorter than women. Yeah.
Although I have a 91-year-old neighbor who walks every day without, support. So you never know.
Yeah. My great grandpa lived to be 103. Right.
There you go.
So, curious to see what this graph would be after that, because I could see almost the increase year over year reversing, right? So, but this is just saying the number of people that are no longer households, right? So
it doesn't necessarily mean that somehow the house evaporates, right? Or every single, here's the thing, the silver tsunami, this is making the assumption that every single time a baby boomer passes away who will happen to be a homeowner, that house immediately hits the market and is to be sold.
Yeah.
So that is way oversimplifying the situation. I would guarantee a big percentage of these people have living trusts, okay? Which means that when someone passes, technically speaking, nothing's changed in terms of the house and its title. yes, whoever the beneficiary of that trust, that changes for their life. But a lot of these folks, yeah, I get it. Some of them are going to sell and some of them aren't. So these numbers aren't at face value representing every single property that would be sold. Is all that's the point I'm making, is it's not as straightforward as people are trying to make it out to be.
Yeah. And so here's a scenario. A baby boomer has a house that's free and clear because they bought it for $10,000 40 years ago, right? I'm joking, but that's not far off.
Yeah.
They bought it for $80,000 in the 80s. Now that house is in California and it's worth $2.5 million, right? Lots of markets where this is a very real scenario.
Yeah.
They have 2 children, and after fees and whatever else, each child's going to get $1 million, right? So those kids can go to Vegas, or they can say, I'm really tired of renting because I haven't been able to afford my local marketplace, and now we're finally going to be able to buy homes. So that's where we're looking at something that maybe indicates an increase in supply.
Right.
But if you take one home off the market and create 2 home buyers,
Yes.
now you have a shortage.
Yeah. That's a great point, right? So again, oversimplification from these non-experts talking about a silver tsunami. Or what about this? Anecdotal. Neighbors directly behind us, they were in their 90s. They have both in the last 6 months passed away, which is always so strange, right? Married couple. That's a different story. But what has happened? Their son. We've been seeing for the last 3 months the house get painted, tented for termites, all the landscaping redone, and all this stuff. And the house looks brand new. And guess who's moved into it now?
Him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, that home didn't hit the market.
Yeah.
And that was a situation that we're talking about right now.
I think, so I've had some of those where, if there's an existing mortgage and the child wants to move in, sometimes they don't qualify to refinance the loan, so they can't. If you're inheriting a home, once again, that's $2 million in equity. Even if you're a single child and you don't have to split it up, I can see the appeal of just selling it. Now you're $2 million richer, right? But that still may not get them the quality of life or that home in the same area if that's their goal. We're in a high cost area. I could see in more middle America, or average price is more 250 to 500. That scenario being much more prevalent, right? Where it's like you're not walking away, relatively speaking, with a ton of money anyway.
Right.
So you just take over living in the house.
Yeah. Well, in California, you have Prop 19 too.
Right.
If you do move back in, you don't have that reassessment triggered.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
If you're an only child, otherwise you can get a trust loan from us.
Yeah.
And still get the single parent to child exclusion.
Oh, we should talk about trust loans since you brought it up.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the same thread of what we're talking about.
Right.
So, in closing on this concept of, baby boomers dying out over the next 10 years, creating a silver tsunami. We just don't see it. I'm not saying that the scenario where property isn't going to be sold won't happen, but it's not as simple as people are trying to make it out to be, as usual. Remember, people on Twitter and X and quote unquote real estate experts have been calling for a crash for a long time now, right?
Well, the silver tsunami isn't just in real estate. People have been talking about this just in the general workforce, right? And how companies were going to implode because millennials didn't know how to run a company and didn't want to learn about manufacturing. And that, our economy hasn't felt that. The average person hasn't felt that, I don't think, right?
No.
Maybe there have been companies that weren't able to go on because the boomer owner is no longer working and didn't have any type of succession plan in place, right?
Yeah.
Shout out Cody Miller for his podcast on that. But in reality, life goes on. So maybe millennials started new markets, and we haven't had the silver tsunami effect that people were expecting in business and in manufacturing.
Right.
So you just say, how is it different from real estate?
Yeah. It's not.
Yeah.
Interesting. What's a trust loan?
So specific to California, and Prop 19 says that if somebody was living in a home and they pass away, they can pass the home down to a child, and the child has to live in the home, and your tax basis doesn't get reassessed, and if it's high value, maybe only a partial reassessment. Well, if you have more than one child that you're passing your inheritance to, then those children need to get their inheritance, right? And try not to get too much into the weeds on this, but there's scenarios where you have to pay out the other children and you still want to avoid reassessing your taxes. So that's where a trust loan comes in that you get it. It's just a very short-term loan to pay out everybody that's in the trust. And now the trust says that your one child, the home's going to them. They can move in as their primary residence and you still get the tax benefit of not having your taxes reassessed. Without the trust loan, and once again, there's scenarios where this isn't necessarily true, but if you were just going to do a traditional refinance, like a cash out refinance to pay off the other sibling, then you put the cash out refinance in a personal name, that was not, it triggers reassessment. Yeah. So in short, the trust loan is a way to not trigger tax reassessment when you have an inheritance situation.
Right, because traditional financing, you can't get a loan against a non-irrevocable trust.
An irrevocable trust. That's the key part.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, this might be going over some people's head, but the point is you're going to be facing this issue at some point because of the silver tsunami.
Yes. Yes.
And you're going to have to deal with it. And then the other piece is, for folks who are younger that have parents that are listening to this, please make sure your parents have living trusts, right? Because the alternative is probate. And that means you're entrusting the court system in the state of the government, let's call it, regardless of the state you live in, to decide who gets what, like
in life, not just the home. Yeah.
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 Like not just the home, but in everything. And we're talking about this stuff dragging out, especially if there's conflict between siblings for multiple years. And it's expensive.
Tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Like,
for a $500,000 home, you're $20,000 legal fees.
So you want to pay the government tens of thousands of dollars and have it drag out for years when, your parents pass away, or get a living trust. And I've seen living trusts done as inexpensively as $1,500 for a boilerplate one. Obviously, it's much more expensive for more nuanced and higher net worth situations. That can be $10,000. I don't know. But it just depends. The point is, ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. Have your parents get a living trust if they haven't already. And if you're of the baby boomer generation and you don't have a living trust, two things to say to you. That AOL.com email address, it's time to get a new one. Okay, Gmail, welcome to Gmail. And then also get a living trust. If you need recommendations, Mike knows some good people.
Yeah, and not just baby boomers. If you own a home in California, it goes to probate if it's worth more than $170,000.
Yeah.
So to rephrase that, every home in California will go to probate unless there's unless it's in the name of a living trust. So I have one, right?
I have one.
And the way that I looked at it is I can do this now and have everything lined up and ready to go, or I can not be. Essentially, I saw it as insurance, right? It's like, this is something I eventually need. I may as well do it now because it's going to be cheaper to do it now.
If you are younger and you have children, you are insane if you don't have a living trust.
Yeah, because that's a piece of it too. Yeah.
Right? Because who's getting your kids?
Right.
I mean, is that kind of important?
Right.
Who's managing the hopefully millions of dollars in life insurance that that is being paid out to take care of those kids? Who's the caretaker and the guardian moving forward? Like all those things. Oh my gosh, can you imagine your kids ending up with some random situation that you would never have blessed? Yeah. Look, if you're at college age or in your 20s, not married yet, and still figuring your life out, fine, don't have a living trust. But any other category, as an adult, married, kids, old, whatever, doesn't matter what your age or demographic is, you should have a living trust.
Yeah, because it's 170 on value, not on proceeds.
Right.
Yeah. So it's every house in California. And it's not just houses, right? Checking accounts and any assets. There's a number on that too. I think it's closer to 200,000. So, but to your point, if you've done well, and even if you're single and you don't have a house, but if you have more than $200,000 in assets, I'm not a trust attorney, but I'm pretty sure that's going to probate, right? Ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's the other piece of this conversation is trust loans are not cheap loans to get, right? So if you're working with an estate planner and you can plan this out a little bit, because a lot of people in older age, it's a gradual thing, right? It doesn't happen overnight where they pass. So you can try to get a traditional cash out refinance loan at normal rates and normal fees and avoid that altogether.
Beforehand, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get ahead of it. Okay. That was a lot.
Yeah.
Was there something else you wanted to chat about?
Other than every time I see Freddie Mac, I think it's like a cool name for a rapper, or it reminds me of Bernie Mac, like it should be a comedian, where Fannie Mae is like the old maid.
Why?
Right?
Who came up with these names? Ginny Mae, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac? Like who? I don't know.
I don't know, but I want to be on the Freddie Mac team if I have to choose. That's
You don't want to be called Fannie?
yeah, right, exactly. There's other jokes about that. If you want to talk about FSBO, we could talk about FSBO.
Oh, that's right. FSBOs. Yeah.
Okay. So there's somebody.
I actually don't mind FSBOs, Mike, but my one requirement is you need a good escrow company.
Okay.
But
so
go ahead.
so this is my take. Yeah. Okay. So there's somebody on Instagram that's doing an experiment, and they're going to try to sell their house, a very nice house. It's $3-4 million house.
What does the FSBO stand for, first of all?
For sale by owner, FSBO.
Right. Somebody wants to sell their house, and they're choosing not to hire a real estate agent.
Right. And it's the complaint that you probably immediately think of. They don't want to pay the realtor fees, and especially at that price point, it could be $100,000.
Well, especially these days with realtors having a bad stigma because of the NAR lawsuit and everything that's going on, and
Right.
like the perception is that realtors are, maybe taking advantage in some way. Now, that's a generalization, and I don't personally believe that. And there's a lot of really incredible realtors out there, and value for why you would want representation from them. But anyway,
Yeah. So he's going through the process, right? And there's a couple of things just right off the bat. First off, this guy has a $4 million house, and I think he said he's moving to Costa Rica or something. So I don't think he's currently working.
Okay.
So he has the time and the energy to invest all this effort to learn how to do this, right? Plus, it appears he's done pretty well for himself, so he also has the ability to do all this, right?
Yeah, so a pretty unique situation.
Yes. And just like right off the bat, he's got his reels going on Instagram. And so it's like, okay, you know how to do decent marketing, and you must have an editor or know how to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Like there's a baseline skill set as well as time set
It also matters what kind of market it is.
that this person has, that I would argue the average person
Doesn't. Right.
Right. So that's just
Other than putting a makeshift for sale sign out
Yeah.
front.
And then, there's been some complaints like, oh, I think it was Zillow has a separate section for FSBOs compared to regular to market, right? And that's part of the complaint. He doesn't say that there's nothing wrong with realtors. It's the quote unquote system, right? Everything starts with no system and eventually becomes a system because people are trying to make it easier and better,
Yeah.
right? So thus, if you choose to participate in the system, you get the benefits. That's no different for Zillow. They're a for-profit company. They didn't used to exist, and they really blew up when they struck a deal with NAR. And if there's anybody to be upset about Zillow, it's realtors, because
They sold their soul, yeah.
yeah. And, one of the other complaints was that when a call goes into Zillow, it goes to a Zillow agent. It doesn't go to the seller. And it's like, well, yeah, realtors have that problem too, where if it's your listing, you don't get the inbound calls. It goes to Zillow, because once again, they're a for-profit company creating this platform. If you're not working with a realtor, then you didn't sell your listing services to them. So you don't get the benefit of it.
Right.
I think that just because it's a public platform doesn't mean it's a public service. It's not the government and your taxes that are paying for this, right? So I think that even when we try to do these experiments, there's a handful of things where that you look at it and go like, things aren't free, and your scenario is pretty unique. I couldn't imagine knowing nothing. And also I think the person has sold more than, or has been a part of the process a few times. This isn't the first time selling a house.
Seasoned homeowner, yeah.
Yeah. So could you imagine if it was your first home, you have to work 40, 50 hours a week, and you've never done it before. You have no marketing experience. You don't like talking in front of a camera.
Yeah.
And he's doing a great job for a FSBO in that, like, he's reaching out to local realtors.
And you said it's $4 million?
It's a $4 million house.
Well, think about it. So he's still offering buyer side commission.
Yes, he's offering 2% buyer side commission.
So he just doesn't want to pay the listing agent. And look, a $4 million house, 2.5% is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right. Like, what is that? 100 grand?
100 grand. Yeah.
Yeah. So I understand. I mean, that is a lot of money.
It is. Yeah.
So you understand the incentive for why he would want to do it on his own. But on the other hand, like, here's where it's tough for somebody like that. $4 million house, days on market average is pretty high.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like it's in the hundreds, if not a year plus,
Right.
right? Depending on the market. So where the realtor comes into play is they're great marketers if they're a good top producer and they're used to the higher priced homes like that. And then, their network, they understand how to work things. They understand how to throw the bougie open houses and get hundreds of people in the house. Just exposure, right? That's in my opinion where a realtor is going to run circles around somebody trying to do it themselves.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think, a common objection that a realtor will have is like, I negotiate this for a living.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to negotiate this against somebody who's never done it before.
Yeah, especially disclosure rules and laws and dealing with like not screwing up from a liability standpoint. Because FSBOs, look, you're on your own to a certain extent. And if you forgot to disclose something and it comes to bite you in the butt after the close of escrow and now there's a lawsuit, how much did you really save? Right?
Yeah. And he recognizes there's a lot good about the video, and like he recognizes, hey, I could try this and not sell the home, and then I've wasted all that time and money and effort.
Yeah.
So it is an experiment.
Yeah.
But I just
less capital gains too. Hire a realtor. It's going to cost you $100,000 on $4 million. You're also not paying tax on that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think my biggest problem with a lot of these scenarios is just it's so dependent on this person and their skill set and their situation. Yeah. And I just don't see, I would hate for a person to see this and be like, wow, I don't need a realtor.
So if you don't want to do the realtor thing, I'm going to tell you, in California, we're in an escrow state. So I can only speak to California. If you hire an incredible escrow company, you should be okay, is what I'll say, right? Because they can help chaperone this thing in a way that a buyer or a seller can't on their own. And if it's an escrow that really knows what they're doing, they're going to make sure the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. So by the way, my wife owns an escrow company. I hear about these stories constantly. And she does FSBOs regularly. And she is the reason the transactions are able to close successfully, right? So a good escrow company, because you can't sell a home without an escrow in California. Sorry, but you can sell a home without a realtor.
Yes. And I think the one situation where that makes a lot of sense is you already know the buyer. They're a friend, they're family.
Interfamily.
Right? We just talked about passing homes down. I mean, I've done some where you're selling the house to your child, right? You're happy to give a discount, but not 100%.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So those do exist. And you probably don't need a full service realtor for that transaction.
Or negotiate a fee with a realtor that's watered down.
Right.
Like remember.
Paperwork and.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you're, like I said, it goes down to the quality of the professional you're hiring. A good escrow company, you've had the experience working with a terrible escrow company on a transaction. It's nightmarish.
Yeah.
Because they're the facilitator, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the same can be said for a realtor. Like there's the barrier to entry in real estate is incredibly low. You just have to pass a silly test, okay? And then you can start selling real estate.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, the 80-20 rule applies at more like the 90-10 or 95-5 in real estate. There's a ton of goofballs and there's a handful of professionals. And if you hire a goofball, you get what you pay for.
You get goofball service?
You get goofball service, okay? And then, I get it, you want to support a friend, but support a friend someplace else in a different way. Don't support a friend with, hey, sell my $2 million house. That's not the way to do it.
Yeah. So last thought on this is that it's interesting how we have a profession where you can't really do this, right? Like if somebody wanted to buy a house and they say, oh, I don't want to work with a lender, their fees are too high. It's like, okay, if you can go raise that money on your own, and not that that's impossible, but rates right now, call it 6.5 to 7, right? So even if you found somebody that would be willing to give you $1 million and a 7% interest rate, like lenders are kind of unique in that it's very hard to DIY lending.
No. I don't know, maybe someday with crowdsource funding and cryptocurrencies. And I'm not saying the makeup of our industry isn't going to change someday, but right now, why would you? Fannie Mae's got everything streamlined, desktop underwriting, automated underwriting. Everything's pretty straightforward, and the interest rates are probably as good as you're going to find.
Well, that's the thing is that
Like 3% down at a minimum, whatever.
Yeah, through bundling loans and selling them in the secondary market, you get better rates.
Yeah.
Right. But even in a world where things are crowdsourced or Bitcoin or, decentralized, essentially, you still need a platform. It's not like if you're redoing a bathroom, you could say, oh yeah, I'm just going to go to Home Depot and buy some drywall and DIY it. I just don't, it's very unique in a small space where you could do that as a lender or
Totally.
For yourself.
Totally. Yeah. So meaning if you need a loan officer, you call Mike and I. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess that's it. All right. Right on. Until next time. Thank you, everybody. Like and subscribe.